Hello and welcome to Freya's Tropical Garden. We're at the end of March now and spring is definitely here. Although we have had some frosty mornings earlier in the month, the weather's been warming up and a lot of the spring growth is now starting to come through. Here's what we've got coming up for you on today's episode. There is the draw for my last competition to win a spider plant, details on how you can enter my new competition to win a chili plant. I visit Ventnor Botanic Gardens in winter for evergreen inspiration. And we take a look at the 20 plants that look best in my garden in spring. But first, here's what's changed in my garden since the last episode. Since digging up a lot of my garden last year, it still looks quite bare and messy in this area at this time of year, but I've moved a lot of my pots over into this part of the garden so they can get more sun. I've also started preparing this very uneven patch of ground to put some grass seed down where there were beds last year that I removed. But elsewhere in the garden there are several spring flowers, like these daffodils tete-a-tete, which are a dwarf variety, and I have these growing in pots, as well as these beautiful daffodils called apricot whirl, which I planted in my lasagna planting pot a couple of years ago. I also have several dwarf varieties of tulip growing in pots, including this beautiful yellow and red one called Stressor, a lovely lemon yellow coloured tulip called The First. These have been flowering for a couple of weeks now and are still looking good. And this vibrant red tulip called Scarlet Baby. And I bought all of these tulips in a multi-pack last October. The first flower has started to form on my snake's head fritillary. I absolutely love the checkered pattern on these flowers. While my white camellia has continued to put out flowers throughout the month, and this plant has grown so much since I planted it 3 years ago, and I'm starting to get more and more flowers produced on it. The red camellia hasn't started flowering yet, but those should open soon. And my Magnolia stellata is another plant that's grown bigger and producing more flowers now. And these lovely white flowers really do stand out when you're looking at the garden from the house. The yellow flowers on my acacia have continued to look good throughout March, although they are now starting to fade a little. You can see they're still bringing colour to the garden. And I did show you in an earlier episode that my Strelitzia reginae is starting to flower for the first time. These flowers still haven't opened, so I'm still waiting for that one. My Tetrapanic steroidal giant still has the leaf that started to grow in December, as well as another new leaf, and the pup is emerging from the base again. This Cordyline Charlie boy is the Cordyline with 9 lives. 2 years ago I thought it had been killed by the frost. Last year I thought it died because it rotted, and now it's got 2 growth points. There's new growth from my canna patterns as well. This variety of canna is particularly fast growing and does flower earlier than other cannas. And my Paulownia tomentosa is starting to produce some new growth buds as well. These leaves will be massive. I've found some Brunnera Alexander's grape growing in the middle of my path. I'll be digging this up and putting it in a pot. And the new leaves started to emerge earlier in the month from my Podophyllum spotty dotty and now have opened up. This is a really attractive plant that grows well in shade. And of course the leaves are starting to open up on my Musa Basju banana plants. By this time next month these will start to look much more spectacular. But for now it's just lovely to see the large leaf jungly foliage opening up again. These leaves really do transform the garden at this time of year. The Persicaria red dragons also starting to grow again from ground level. The leaves of this plant are particularly vibrant and red at this time of year when the new growth is emerging. Later in the year they fade to a more dull green colour. As you can see with this one, which looks like it's actually survived from last year, so it must have been covered up and sheltered somewhere. But my Xanthogetia aethiopica also didn't die back to ground level this winter, so this has got a little bit of a head start on growth this year, and now it's starting to look really good already, so it probably won't be too long before it's flowering. And this really shows what a mild winter we've had overall this year. Even parts of my Colocasia pink china didn't die back completely and have now got new leaves emerging from them. The huge leaves of my Gunnera tinctoria started to wake up earlier in the month, and now the leaves are starting to grow really, really well. And these are going to be absolutely huge in a month or two. For size, this is probably one of the most spectacular plants I've still got in the ground. In my pots, I've got some lovely growth on my Lilium clawed shride. And my voodoo lily, Dracunculus vulgaris, started to wake up earlier in the month. This now has some lovely leaves opening up on it, and it won't be too long before the flower spike starts to emerge. This is one of my favourite plants because every aspect of it is interesting. My Melianthus major has remained evergreen throughout winter. Unfortunately, it's quite small, so it doesn't look like it's going to form any flowers this year. And the buds are now starting to open up on my Acer palmatums. I have a few different varieties of Acer, some red, some green, and even a white variety. And I can't wait to see these glorious colours in my garden again. Which is something that my Sambucus nigra black lace also brings to the garden with its dark black-red foliage. While the new growth emerging on the Photinia red robin also looks spectacularly vibrant at this time of year. I have this planted right outside a window of my house, and it looks particularly spectacular when the sunlight is shining through these vivid red leaves. Unfortunately, the main stem of my Musa sycamensis collapsed in the frost. However, it should regrow, even if not from the main stem, then from around the base. This week I've also done quite a lot of potting up. A lot of the seedlings that have been growing over the last couple of months need to be separated out, like these two Jacaranda mimosifolia. As you can see, there's quite a lot of roots here in this pot. So I'm just going to tease these two apart very, very gently. I'm trying to make sure that each seedling comes away with as much root as possible. And then I'm going to put each one into its new pot and give it some more soil. Try to avoid firming down the soil because you don't want to damage those roots. They're particularly vulnerable having been separated like this. I've also separated out and repotted the Sugar Rush Twisty Chili seedlings. As you can see, once again, there's plenty of root here. And I'm just going to speed this up so that you don't have to watch me spend ages teasing these roots apart. And then we have 4 individual plants here. I've also separated out these Echium seedlings. Now these are the ones that worry me particularly. I've never grown Echium from seed before, and Echiums don't like their roots being disturbed. So these will be particularly susceptible to going into transplant shock. In order to try and reduce the risks of transplant shock, I've decided to remove the lower leaves of some of these plants. This will reduce the amount of water that can be lost through the leaves and give the plant a chance to recover. And I'll come back to you in the next episode and let you know how they're getting on. I've labelled my plants with my new label maker, which is the Brother PTH110. The labels from my previous label maker were fading in the sunlight, and this one came with some recommendations online, so I thought I'd give this one a go. It's simple enough to use. You just type in the name of the plant, press print, and it prints the label out. There we go. You can see we've got a Sugar Rush stripy label here. You just peel off the back of the label and stick it onto your plant label. After repotting, I make sure everything's had a good water, and I leave it here overnight so it's away from bright direct light. Next up, it's competition time, and we've got the draw for my last competition, as well as a brand new competition for you to enter. Now it's time for the draw for the competition to win a spider plant or chlorophytum, which was in episode 2 of this series. Now I've only had 2 entries into this competition, so it's been a bit of a low turnout this month. I've had entries from CatBunk4548 and from Catherine Grimes 2308. So I've decided not to do a draw for this competition, and both entrants will receive a spider plant. Congratulations to both of you. Please email freyastropicalgarden@gmail.com. Let me know your address and I'll get that posted to you. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you probably know that I grow quite a few different varieties of chilies. Some of them milder and some of the super hot varieties as well. Some of them I grow more for the colour and some for the flavour that they add rather than the heat. So for this month's competition, I'm going to be giving away 1 chili plant to the winner. I will give the winner a small selection of plants that they can choose from so that they can choose an appropriate heat that they will enjoy. Or if you don't like eating chilies, these are still lovely plants to grow for ornamental value. Please remember this competition is free to enter, and all you need to do is comment below and confirm that you live in the UK, as I can only send plants out to UK addresses. The competition will close on the 18th of April, and the draw will be made in the next episode of Freya's Tropical Garden. Good luck to everybody who enters. Coming up next, I visit Ventnor Botanic Gardens back at the end of January to show you what plants stay evergreen there throughout winter. One of the best ways to get inspiration for plants that will provide interest during the cold winter months is to visit a local garden to find out what plants they are growing that are still looking good. Last year I visited RHS Wisley in winter in order to bring you some inspiration for hardy evergreen plants. And this year, at the end of January, I headed back to Britain's hottest garden on the Isle of Wight to see what can be grown in the warmest areas of the UK. If you haven't yet seen my series on Ventnor Botanic Gardens, I'll put a link in the description to these videos, as well as a link to my Wesleyan winter video. Although I went back to Ventnor with the sole aim of bringing you some more inspiration for hardy evergreen plants, when I got there I was just awestruck by how beautiful this garden is still looking in winter. Many plants that have died back in my garden are still going strong here in Ventnor, and quite frankly the garden didn't look much different from when I visited during the summer. I quickly realised that there would be lots of plants here that are not reflective of plants that will stay evergreen, even in warmer areas of the UK. So in this video I'll start off with the plants that are less hardy, but there is still plenty of hardy evergreen inspiration to come. Strobilanthes Glutinosa, or the sticky bluebell, is still relatively untested in the UK, although not thought to be frost hardy. It was brought to Ventnor by a private collector from the Indian Himalayas. It can grow up to around 1 metre in height and has soft, velvety leaves which are sometimes sticky to touch. It prefers well-draining, acidic to neutral soil and partial shade, and flowers all winter long. Paraserianthes Lophantha is a beautiful tree known as the plume albizia and is native to Australia, where in some parts it's considered a weed. It produces creamy white bottlebrush flowers from May to August, although this one is flowering in late January. It prefers natural sandy or loam-based soil, but is frost tender, only surviving in the UK's most sheltered gardens. Lampranthus orange is a succulent native to the semi-deserts of South Africa. It has fleshy grey-green leaves and produces orange, daisy-like flowers in spring and summer. It's tolerant of low temperatures but will not survive being frozen, so it can only be grown outdoors in frost-free locations. It prefers to grow in full sun in well-draining, poor soils. Agave Xylonacantha, or the sawleaf agave, is native to Mexico, with rosettes of fleshy leaves and irregularly shaped spines along the margins or edge of the leaf. It prefers to grow in full sun or partial shade in well-draining acidic or neutral soil. It is tolerant of frosts and occasional dips below freezing, but must be kept very dry over winter. Brugmansia Sanguinea, or the red angel's trumpet, is a shrub or small tree native to South America. In Ventnor, this plant is flowering well in late January, but even in my south coast garden it will be cut back to ground level by frost before it produces flowers, although it does grow back in spring. Echium Lusitanicum is a smaller clumping variety of Echium native to Portugal and Spain, commonly known as the violet vein viper's bugloss. Although there is not much information available on the hardiness of this plant, most smaller Echium varieties will only grow in the warmest UK gardens. Echium pininana can often be found in milder areas of the UK, however, and will remain evergreen in winter. Aloe Arborescens, or the candelabra aloe, is a succulent native to South America, which looks particularly stunning flowering here in Ventnor in January. Although it's not among the hardiest of aloes that can be grown in the UK, it can survive to around -4°C if kept very dry over winter, but it will not tolerate hard or sudden frosts. Leucadendron Argentium, or the silver leaf tree, is native to South Africa, where it is a protected tree and the only known natural population is around Table Mountain. Flowers are produced on separate male and female trees, which, if pollinated, develop into silver cones that remain on the trees for many years. It prefers full sun, acid or neutral sandy soil, and is hardy in milder areas of the UK. Freylinia Lanceolata is commonly known as honeybells and is a tree native to South Africa. It produces yellow honey-scented flowers in late summer to early autumn. However, this one is flowering in Ventnor in late January. It grows best in full sun in clay or loam-based soils and is hardy in milder areas of the UK. Podocarpus Henkelii, or Henkel's yellowwood, is a tree native to South Africa. It has long, drooping leaves, but is actually a conifer and produces cones on separate male and female trees. It should survive in milder areas of the UK down to around -5°C, where its light green foliage looks particularly attractive when many evergreen plants are darker in colour. Citrus Ichangense is commonly known as the Ichange pepida and is a slow-growing citrus native to China. It has lemon-scented leaves and flowers and is one of the hardiest varieties of citrus, surviving temperatures between -5 to -10°C, as well as moderate frosts and damp conditions. It has even been recorded as surviving to -15 in China. Hoheria Angustifolia, or the narrow-leaved lacebark, is native to New Zealand. It's an evergreen tree that can grow up to 8 meters tall and produces lots of small white flowers in summer. It can survive down to -10°C, however it will not stay evergreen in colder winters. It grows best in full sun or partial shade and prefers alkaline or neutral soil. Cyathea Australis is commonly known as the rough tree fern and is native to Australia. It's an adaptable plant that's often found growing in sunny or shady positions and can also tolerate more wind than the more commonly grown Dicksonia antarctica. It can survive dips to -7 or 8 and short periods of frost, although protecting the crown in winter is advisable. Olearia Pachyphylla, or the thick-leaved tree daisy, is an endangered shrub native to New Zealand. It can grow up to 3 meters tall with large leathery leaves and produces daisy-like flowers in spring or summer. It is frost-hardy when mature and can survive to around -5°C, but will need protection in colder areas of the UK. Acanthus Sennii, or the Ethiopian acanthus, is a drought-resistant plant native to Ethiopia. It produces beautiful red flowers in midsummer to early autumn, but was still flowering in Ventnor in late January. It can survive to around -10, however the foliage will die back when heavily frosted. Vinca Difformis, or the intermediate periwinkle, is an evergreen plant which can spread up to 1.5 meters. It has lush, dark, glossy leaves and produces whitish-blue flowers in late winter and early spring. It is native to Western Europe and Northwest Africa and is hardy through most of the UK. It grows best in moist, well-draining soil, but will tolerate most soil types. Magnolia grandiflora is an evergreen tree that is hardy in most of the UK. There are several varieties that can be grown for winter interest, and this one is called Charles Dickens. It produces large flowers 15 centimetres across, followed by bright red fruits in autumn, which can last 6 to 8 weeks, adding to its winter interest. Erisha acuminata is a fast-growing tropical tree that can grow to 15 metres tall, although some in Australia have been recorded at 30 metres. It's usually evergreen, but will lose its leaves during times of drought. It prefers full sun and well-draining sandy soil, and it's hardy in the UK, surviving to at least 12 degrees C. Agave parrii, or Parry's agave, is an evergreen succulent with grey-blue leaves native to Mexico through to Arizona. It naturally grows on mountain slopes where winters are often cold and damp, making it an ideal agave to try in the UK. If given protection from winter wet, it can survive down to around -20 degrees C. Of course, winter interest isn't always about evergreen leaves and winter flowering or fruiting varieties. Poncirus trifoliata is a variety of citrus known as the trifoliate orange. It's native to China and Korea and will tolerate moderate frost and snow, surviving winter in most of the UK. But even though it has lost its leaves, I love how the green branches appear to twist. Acer palmatum sangokaku, or the coral-barked maple, is hardy throughout the UK, and again, although it loses its leaves in winter, it is prized for its attractive red branches. It can grow up to 8 metres tall and produces leaves that are pinkish yellow at first, before turning green, and then yellow in autumn. It prefers full sun or partial shade and a sheltered position. There are a few varieties of cornus or dogwood which also have vibrant red stems in winter. Alba sibirica is a medium-sized shrub which can grow to around 2 metres tall. Its leaves turn red in autumn, while in spring and summer it will produce small white flowers. It grows best in full sun or partial shade in moist, well-draining, acidic or neutral soil. Miscanthus is a genus of grass native to Asia, commonly known as Japanese silvergrass. It grows best in full sun and well-draining soil, and is generally hardy in the UK. Although the plant does die back in winter, regrowing from the ground in spring, I think there's something quite remarkable about these towering brown flower heads. Finally, camellias are a wonderful plant to add winter interest to your garden. Hardy throughout most of the UK, with dark, glossy green leaves and varieties that can flower through winter and early spring, there are several different varieties with flowers ranging from white, pink and red, which can either be single or double. They are native to South Asia, growing naturally in woodlands. There are several varieties of camellia growing in Ventnor Botanic Gardens, and although not all are flowering at the same time, it is well worth visiting in winter to see these beautiful flowers in bloom. Camellias prefer acidic or neutral, moist, well-drained soil, and ideally prefer to be watered with rainwater, particularly if you're in a hard water area. They grow best in full or partial shade and prefer a sheltered spot away from cold winds. Coming up next, I've put together some plants that look at their best at this time of year. As spring is arriving and dormant plants are starting to regrow, I wanted to take some time to look at some of the plants that I grow in my Hampshire coastal garden, which look particularly good at this time of year. I plant plenty of spring bulbs to provide some early colour, but here I have identified the 20 plants that I think are the most important in my garden throughout spring. Acacia dealbata is one of my favourite plants in spring because this is one of the first big splashes of colour that my garden gets. Masses of tiny yellow fluffy flowers cover the small tree, which also keeps its leaves in winter, making it a stunning sight while the rest of the garden is still looking brown and dank. Dracunculus vulgaris is a voodoo lily which starts to grow from ground level in early spring and produces this amazing deep red flower that can be around 60 centimetres wide. Although the flower starts to fade after a day, it produces a rotten meat smell which attracts flies to pollinate it. Sauramatum venosum is another voodoo lily in the same family, which also flowers in spring, although it emerges a little later in spring. There are several varieties of lilies that I grow in my garden, most of which flower in summer. I have always loved the big showy flowers on varieties such as Lilium regale and Lilium stargazer, both of which I grow. However, there are also varieties which produce lots of smaller flowers, such as clawed shride and tiger babies, which flower earlier, usually from around May, providing some lovely late spring colour. Melianthus major, or the honeyflower, is a plant that's died back to ground level for the past 2 winters in my garden and therefore hasn't flowered in spring, as the flowers are formed on last year's growth. The last time it flowered, I hadn't started filming for this channel, so I only have this photo of the flower. The fact that I see flowers so rarely on this plant makes it all the more exciting when it does flower. I grow 2 varieties of Persicaria in my garden, the red dragon with deep reddish purple leaves, and the purple fantasy with bright green leaves and striking chevron markings. Both of these plants emerge early in spring and can be among the first plants in my garden to start to regrow, as well as being fast growing, so will quickly provide early foliage and colour contrast. Xanthodeschia ethiopica, or the arum lily, is another plant that emerges from the ground in early spring, or even may not die back in milder winters. It starts to produce these lovely white flowers in spring, and although it can flower again later in the year, it generally produces fewer flowers then. I particularly like Xanthodeschia hercules, which adds extra interest with its larger leaves covered in attractive white spots. I grew up with a magnolia tree in my garden right outside my bedroom window, so it is one of the first plants I think about when spring is coming. I have 2 small magnolias in my garden, the stellata, which produces star-shaped flowers, and the more traditional Solangiana, although this one is much smaller as it hasn't been planted in the ground. There are many different varieties, including some evergreen ones and some with deep pink or purple coloured flowers, and they really do look stunning in spring. Although not hardy in the UK, I grow my Strelitzia outdoors from May to November and bring it indoors for winter. This year my Strelitzia is flowering for the first time. It has taken me around 5 years to get to this point, and typically they take 7 years to flower, so I'm really excited to see these beautiful bird of paradise flowers opening. If growing in pots, they do prefer their roots to be pot bound, so don't be tempted to repot too often. although I primarily grow my Brunnera for their interesting foliage and great shade tolerance. The bright blue clusters of flowers that they produce in spring are absolutely beautiful. I have two varieties of Brunnera in my garden, a variegated form which is prone to reverting back to its original green form, and the beautiful Alexander's Great. They are really easy to grow and make great points of interest at the lower levels of the garden. Another plant that has to be mentioned for its foliage is Acer palmatum. Although there are many different varieties of Acer which can differ in appearance, there are several varieties in which the newly emerged foliage in spring is orangey in colour, later fading to green. Although I don't know the names of my two green acers, the colour is absolutely stunning in spring, especially when contrasted with other green or red foliage. Azalea japonica is another spring flowering plant which takes my breath away. Although mine is only a small low-level shrub, it is covered all over with beautiful hot pink flowers to add a large bright splash of colour to my garden. It makes a lovely impact in my garden at this time of year. I grow a variety of peony in my garden called Bowl of Beauty. I absolutely love these huge, vibrant pink flowers in spring, which really do stand out in my tropical themed garden. Again, there are several varieties of peony with flowers in a range of different colours, single or double flowers, and some varieties bloom earlier than others. They have a relatively short flowering period, which is why it seems all the more special while they last. Although a boutilon can flower at several times of the year, including winter indoors, its main flowering period is spring into summer. I grow a variety called hot orange lava, although there are many varieties with different coloured flowers. Last year I was able to leave my boutilon in the ground over winter with fleece protection, although I took cuttings for insurance, or it can be grown outdoors in pots and brought inside over winter. Iris yellow flag is a plant that was given to me as an extra for free from a seller on Facebook Marketplace, and I planted it in my bog area alongside the gunnera and colocasia, so the lovely yellow flowers in late spring really brighten up this otherwise very foliage dominant area. It's an ideal plant to grow around the edges of a pond or in other damp areas of the garden, and will quickly form a nice clump of bright cheerful colour. Another plant I've added for the foliage is the banana plant Musa basjou. While spring isn't necessarily its best season, as it will have far more leaves in summer, I've included it in the list because for me it is a key plant in spring for the return of large tropical foliage early on in the season. Pretty much as soon as the weather starts to warm up, it will start sending up new green leaves, giving back that jungle feel at the higher levels of the garden. Also included in my winter plant video for its evergreen foliage and early flowering period, many varieties of camellia, including the two I grow in my garden, are spring flowering plants with large colourful flowers contrasted with dark glossy green leaves. Flowers are quite short-lived, however each of my camellia flowers tends to open at different times, spreading the overall flowering period over several weeks. Photinia red robin is another foliage plant that looks best in spring when the new emerging growth is a vibrant red colour. It will fade slowly through the year to green and remain evergreen in winter, but it's most striking in spring. Although I prune mine to a low shrub, it can be grown as a small tree or as a privacy hedge, so is a versatile plant to add more spring colour. Again, different varieties of clematis flower at different times of year, such as Clematis tiger, which flowers in summer. But I grow some varieties in my garden which are spring flowering, such as the Nubia pink with deep pink flowers. and some varieties can be very fast growing, which is particularly helpful if you're just starting out. Hemeracalis, or the daylily, is a plant that can flower in late spring, and although the flowers only last for a day, as the nickname suggests, as the plant gets bigger, it will produce several flowers, prolonging the flowering period. I have grown 2 varieties in my garden, and I love the big, showy flowers and vibrant colours they produce. Callistemon, or bottle brushes, are shrubs that flower from late spring. Their nickname comes from the vibrant flowers which resemble the bristles of a bottle brush, and flowers can be red, pink, white, or even yellow. The callistemon I grow have bright red flowers, and they look so different from anything else in my garden, making it one of my favourite plants. Well, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Freya's Tropical Garden. Please don't forget to leave your comments below, and please do subscribe to this channel to help it to grow. I'll see you next time on Freya's Tropical Garden. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or X for video updates as well as my flower of the day. And you can email me at freyastropicalgarden@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out my website at freyastropicalgarden.co.uk, where you can find a range of information including public gardens that I've visited and information on plants that have been shown on my videos. I've had so much fun making this video, but if you'd like to make a contribution towards running costs, you can do so via PayPal.